one of our graduates. He's been where you are today. He played trumpet while he was here, as well as very excellent guitar. He just told me he's not playing guitar today, and I'm actually devastated. I think you need to, in the Peter Pan, where Tinkerbell is dying and they say, what are they supposed to say? I believe, whatever. I think we need to say, play YouTube, you can do that here, can't you?
We'd have to play audio. We'd have to look up audio.
We don't have audio? Oh.
Not to do.
Well, you will be in for a thrill when you hear him play guitar. I'm sorry that he's not.
Maybe we can get it set up at the end.
I'll try and do what I
Too
can.
hard.
I'll do what I can.
All right, cool. He's gonna talk today. David has developed a very successful entrepreneur in business, teaching guitar, recording, selling CDs, appearing. He has won an international competition in fingerstyle guitar. So this is big time stuff, and we're very happy to have him talking today about some of that self-discipline and some of that focus, right?
Yep.
I'll shut up and let you get started. So you have time to play that YouTube.
Okay. I call this productive practice, and this is something that seems to be really important. I've seen just as I've been teaching, and even in my own practice, just the over and over challenge of getting that practice time in and being motivated to do it. I remember growing up just in my parents' basement. I didn't grow up in their basement. I had all my music stuff set up in the basement there. And I would go down there for hours, like after school. I'd be down there 3, 4, 5, even more hours. And I didn't have task lists. I didn't have goals or agendas. It was all very natural. I could just play, and I was making a lot of music. And so now it's not like that. It's much harder. I have to do lots of planning, like this stuff. I have to kind of fight for that. But I'm trying to get back to that kind of practice. I'm going to talk about ways that I'm doing that, ways that I'm able to progress towards that in my practice, and how I'm using that in my teaching as well. So as I'm talking, or just kind of throughout this thing, I'll be doing examples and different things, but I want you guys to be thinking about what your practice challenges are, if it's just getting that time in, if it's motivation, if it's like feeling like you're progressing. Because towards the end, I want to address some of those and just help you guys to walk out with a bit more of a plan in your own practice. I did want to kind of define the type of practice we're after, and it would be easy practice. It's fun practice. It's addicting. This is what I'm finding and how I'm using this stuff. Kind of where I got a lot of this information is I've been studying productivity for the last 4 years, just over throughout my life, especially after graduating, becoming a professional and having a family and just lots of things to manage. I was just overwhelmed all the time. I was pulled in all these different directions and pulled kind of equally in a way where I just wasn't doing anything. I felt paralyzed. I wasn't getting anything done, or I was moving very slowly. So I started just studying productivity, and one book I really got into, this one is called Getting Things Done by David Allen, and I use this system now all the time for just managing my whole life. It's kind of a standard in business for the really successful businesses that are very productive and always on top of the best business practices. That's something they follow. Let's see here. I also want to mention, just kind of throughout my studies, the way our current society is, and this is called the technology age and the knowledge age. And we have to process more information now than ever before, and it's growing exponentially. Communication is so much easier. We have marketing everywhere coming at us, and our friends are contacting us all the time. We're receiving messages through all these different types of media, and so our minds are having to manage and sort all that stuff coming at us. So we need tactics. We need to address this, and I think the reason it's not being addressed, and I think we're just not aware that we can address this, is like my parents didn't have to grow up with all of that, so they didn't teach me or pass on to me like how to manage all this stuff. And so now that I'm a parent, I'm starting to think of like my kids and all the stuff they're having to manage. So I'm already like teaching them how to like plan and make lists. And I love it when my 9-year-old son comes to me and shows me like when he went to bed that night, the night before, he's got his task list for the next day, and he's got planned out what he's going to do. I just love seeing that. So in our practice, I think we have to do something to fight to get this to be motivating and effective for us. So one of the main tactics of practice that we're looking for is clearly defined tasks. We want to be able to go into the practice room and know exactly what we're practicing, and I think this is a huge thing that's missing. A lot of times we have the task of work on this, get this up to speed, or just kind of these general statements. And so we go into our practice time and we kind of sit down and we kind of play around with it, and it's very unfocused. And if we're having trouble already just getting into the practice room, and we're kind of sorting out, should I go practice or should I go do something else, you're pretty much always going to go to the thing that feels easiest and clearest on your mind. And so we want to get our practice to be that clear thing, so that if we have that question of should I go practice, and we already know that it's going to be easy, we know what we're going to practice, we can get in there right away. When I do my planning for my practice, I get really motivated and I'm like ready to practice right then, because I just know exactly what to do. We also want to make sure we know our goals, we know what we're trying to accomplish. Another big thing, like I said, if we have a task of work on this piece or this exercise, we really want to break it down into small tasks, like 5 or 10 minute tasks. If they get too big, it just kind of weighs on our mind more. And I think we're kind of, I think kind of the old school way of practicing, and it's still possible now, but is going into the practice room for hours. I think that used to be more possible. But now we have so many things going on that we have to kind of break our practice up. And like for me, my practice, I don't have this set practice time. It's like tasks throughout the day. By having these small tasks, it makes it really easy to sneak them in. This morning, I was going to go for a run, and my family was getting ready to leave for school. My wife's a teacher, and 3 boys that were getting ready to leave, and they had about 10 minutes until they were going to leave. And so I thought I'd wait until they left to say goodbye to them. So I pulled out my list, and I knew I had some short tasks, and I actually got 3 practice tasks done. They went faster than I had thought, and I wasn't planning on doing that, but I was able to just sneak them in because I already knew exactly what to do, and they're small tasks. All right, so let's look at an example. This is a web app called Trello. Anybody use this or know about it? Some people? Yeah, my guitar students know about it. I'm going to explain more about this later, but right now I want to just do an example of a task. So let's define a task. Let's say for your juries, you need to do your harmonic minor scales. So I'm going to down at the bottom here, learn harmonic minor scales, all keys, okay? And then I'm going to open this up. And I want to define what this means. I want to give a bit more of a clear, I'm really distracted. We want to make this even clearer. We want to know what the goal is. I forget what the specific beats per minute, but let's say I want to do all of them at 100 beats per minute, 8 notes, and they need to be memorized, and I just want to be able to do them smooth. Okay? And let's say at first you're going into a task like this, and it's like, oh, 12 keys of this. So we want to break this down to what's next. So I'm going to make a checklist here. And let's say I just need to find out where I'm at on these scales. So I'm going to go through 3 scales a day. I'm going to make it just a task of go through 3 scales just to see where I'm at. So I might start with make notes on that with C, G, and D. And then another day I'd have the same thing on A, E, and B. And so I just kind of list them out. So I have them grouped, and I can go in, and it's only 3 scales to look at. And I just need to make notes on it. I need to maybe try it on the instrument. And your notes might be things like, I have to think about this scale a lot. I can play it, but I'm thinking, very theoretically about it. Maybe some of them you just don't even know what the notes are, and so you might just make a note. I can make down here a comment. Let's say it's D flat, harmonic minor, and I just need to write out the notes for that. That's another task for later. We always want to, if we get new tasks, kind of put them on a list. Don't add that into what you're already doing. And so let's say we got through all of these throughout, let's say it took us 4 days to get through these tasks. And we've got maybe 4 of them we need to write out the notes for. So we can make that either 1 task or 4 tasks. We're just trying to break it down into small tasks. You guys get the idea? I can keep explaining this further, going through this further. Do you guys want to continue on that, or? Crickets. I really want to make sure this is applicable to you guys. So, if you have questions, or if I'm not being clear, or if you need more examples, please say something. Oh, yes.
So, let's say you're learning the harmonic minor scales, and on Monday you want to work on C, G, and E, and Tuesday you're working on E, or A, E, and B, and it goes on like that. Like, how do you make sure that a week later you can still play C, G, and E?
Okay.
Like, you can only practice them all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing you probably would do, let's say, for you, trying to manage all of them at once, that might be too much. So then you just kind of, after going through this to see where you're at, then you might break it down and be like, okay, I'm going to work on these 3 for, a week or 2 or however long you need. But the idea is you're designing it exactly for you. And, that's a good point of you need those refreshers. And so you can just add those into your task list. And if you've got a list running and you're starting to get worried that I might be forgetting this other one, well, put it in there, add it in as a task and put it wherever you need it. Does that help? Okay. One thing to point out about this, and I mentioned, like, if you kind of come up with a task like writing out that you need to write out the notes for this one scale, the reason we don't want to shift to doing that right away is because our mind can start to hop around to all these modes of thinking. Going back to that idea of work on this piece. Okay, so you're going to it and you maybe have to figure out some fingerings. Maybe there's a section you know, okay, so you're trying to build speed on that or trying to get it more fluid. Maybe another section you're working on expression. You're kind of hopping around to all these different modes of thinking, and at the same time, you're trying to decide which one to go to. And so by jumping all around, you become very unfocused in your practice, and it becomes very ineffective that way. So that's why we want to stay on one mode and stay within one task. Okay, another kind of grouping of types of practice is what I call challenges. And this is kind of has to do with the question of just remembering things. So I use these challenges. One of the first ones I often start with, I call it the board game challenge. And basically what we do, let's say we've got a sheet of music, and I do this with my guitar students a lot. We lay the music flat, and then we have like a game piece, like a penny or something. And let's say we're trying to play through this one page at 60 beats per minute. So that's our goal, to get through it all the way with no mistakes. All right, so we lay this flat. Now first we need to define what is a mistake. You know, because you could get to a spot and you maybe did something that you didn't like, and you could even start to get really overcritical of yourself and you'll never finish it. So you want to pick up to about 3 things. So let's say our defining right is correct notes, correct fingerings, and correct rhythms. We'll just stay within that, 60 beats per minute, and we're going to play through. And all you have to do to start with is play until you make a mistake. Anybody can do that, right? Play until you make a mistake, you put that marker there, and then you go again and try to beat that. You try to see if you can go a little further. Remove that marker down the page. And we're trying to get it until we get it all the way to the end. Now this seems really simple and ridiculous, and why would I use a little marker or a little game piece thing on that? When I take this page and I have to say, okay, I need to play all that, 60 beats per minute, no mistakes, that looks hard to me, like depending on the piece, but it could be kind of overwhelming to me. But when I say I just have to play until I make a mistake, and then I get to put that marker there, now I just have to play until I beat that marker. It's much easier on the mind. It gives me visual feedback of how far I've gone through. So I feel this sense of accomplishment, and I'm more excited to try to beat that marker. It's kind of like in a video game. You win, you beat level 1, and then you kind of want to see if you can beat level 2. You just kind of start getting addicted that way. For me, this is addicting practice, doing things like this. And one of the huge benefits, there's a bunch of benefits to it. One is, I already said, easing the mind, but it makes you so much more focused on the thing you're trying to play. Just the other day in a lesson, I had a student play a piece for me, and they kept kind of making these mistakes, and I would say start over, and they would make these mistakes again. And I said, okay, we're going to do the board game challenge. And so we started it, and they immediately played the whole thing, no mistakes. And it just immediately put their mind into, they were more zeroed into that music by having this specific challenge. Before that, I think their mind was just swimming around a little too much. This gives us another clearly defined task. And another huge thing is, when you're done practicing. You know that